Thank you, Diane. Good morning. I am Clara Jimenez, and I am delighted to serve as your coordinator today. Our pastor, Reverend Dr. Leon Dunkley, is away this week, and the format today of the service is a bit unusual. Rather than a typical reflection, this service is a celebration of and a reflection on nature, and is presented by 6 members of our congregation and also expressed through the selection of hymns. But first, a few announcements. If you are new to North Chapel, welcome. If you are visiting, please consider signing our guest book at the back of the sanctuary. We encourage everyone to join us after the service. I see that there is something tasty that will be served on the porch, and visitors as well as old friends are all welcome to join us then. Monica will be leading spiritual exploration if we have any young visitors coming later. And I have an announcement, Jenny.
Good morning. So I'm wondering, how many people here like it when we have these services where a number of different voices share the reflection? Good, okay. Well, we've created another opportunity next month, and that will be on the 13th. And we're looking for I'm looking for 3 people willing to give part of a reflection. During August, our monthly theme is imagination. So that gives you a really broad possibility of what you might choose as a reading that somebody else has written, or that you yourself have written or write between now and then. What you read would only need to be 5 minutes long, because 3 different people will share it. Haven't figured out whether we're doing it all one right after another or spacing it out through the service. If imagination isn't enough to get you going, I have a prompt for those people who like to write from a prompt. I was amazed when, maybe you have a story to finish that, or might write a story about something that's happened in your life or that you imagine. So those are some possibilities. My name is Jenny. Yes?
What's the date on that?
August 13th. That's 2 weeks from today. So think this week. I'm here and we'll be here after the service, so you can approach me, you can email me, you can text me, you can and Joanna will put some, if you don't know how to get hold of me, and don't feel like saying something about it today, but maybe tomorrow or later this week think, I'd like to do that. Joanna will put something in as how to get a hold of me, and again, remind you that what the theme is. But it would be great to have some different voices come up and be a part of the service. Thank you.
Thank you, Jenny. Today's service is a celebration of nature and a reflection of our connections with the natural world. What is your relationship with nature? How much do you care for our environment and the beings with whom we share the planet? How does nature influence your mental and physical well-being? How does it affect the choices you make about where you live, what you consume, what you vote for? All these questions are often explored in psychology in the study of nature connectedness. Nature connectedness is our ability, each human's ability, to feel that nature is part of our identity. It is our capacity to understand and respect nature's rhythm and cycles, the enjoyable aspects, the unpleasant ones, and the terrifying. As our sense of connectedness increases, so does our affection and care for nature, and thus our sense of stewardship and commitment to protect the natural world. Nature connectedness is, of course, cultivated by placing ourselves in nature and taking the time to observe it and experience it. Psychologists call this experience of nature. This experience of nature is essential to our own psychological well-being, but also critical to the survival of the planet. Studies have shown a concerning global decrease of humans' experience of nature as more of our activities move indoors or to heavily populated and nature-poor environments. The concern, of course, is that as the human's experience of nature decreases, so does the care and concern for the planet and our sense of stewardship. Fortunately, increasing our experience of nature is not limited to those of us privileged to live in settings like these beautiful surroundings or able to go on great expeditions. Every little bit counts. The urban park, the tree in the hospital courtyard, the houseplants in the office, the terrarium in the classroom, the permaculture garden in our front lawn. And of course, the words of authors such as those you will hear today that remind us to love and respect this magnificent planet. We will now have a brief time of meditation.
Hi, good morning. When Diane asked me to speak today, she said, maybe you could have your 4-year-old join you, Elliot. And unfortunately, Elliot was invited to an impromptu nature walk this morning, which I couldn't refuse him on. So you just gave me Diane. Anyway, when she asked me to do a reading on nature, I had been thinking a lot about what Clara spoke about. I was thinking a lot about the floods and the wildfires and the smoke and the heat domes and boiling oceans, all the devastation that's been caused this summer, and the disconnect that much of the population seems to have from some of this, believing it's something separate. I was looking at the statistics that just in the first half of this year alone, there were 12 weather and climate events that have exceeded over $1 billion each in losses, which doesn't even account for what happened here in New York earlier this month. Meanwhile, it seems like, and people are really struggling, and insurance companies are dropping coverage in Florida and California and Louisiana and other states, citing inherent risk or increasing risk and construction cost. But I was watching how policymakers around the country are taking action to really stop the big investment managers from investing in climate. These funds that are called Climate and Social Goals, ESG. Congress had anti-ESG month this month, and the GOP is calling on hearings and bills to deter this type of investing. And on a state level, there's actually been 165 pieces of proposed legislation in 37 states to counter ESG investment practices, and 15 laws were passed in states so far. So, you know, when she asked me that, I was thinking about all this stuff, and in the backdrop, I thought a little bit about what some of the things that Clara was talking about, and I thought it might be helpful. It was helpful for me to revisit the Buddhist perspective on nature, which really focuses on interconnection and compassion. And so I have two very quick readings. First, this is from The Wise Heart, as a book by Jack Kornfield. It said, from the perspective of Buddhist psychology, compassion is natural. It derives from our interconnection, which Buddhism calls interdependence. This can be readily seen in the physical world. In the womb, every child is interdependent with its mother's body. If either of them is sick, the other is affected. In the same way, we're interdependent with the body. We're interdependent with the body of the earth, the minerals of the soil that make up our wheat and our bones. The storm clouds become our drinks and our blood. The oxygen from our trees and forests is the airs we breathe. The more consciously we realize this shared destiny, the more compassion arises for the earth itself. The second is a brief excerpt from an interview that Vietnamese Buddhist monk Thich Nhat Hanh gave in 2011. He said, the earth is not just the environment. The earth is you. When you touch the nature of inner being, and at that moment, you can have real communication with the earth. And that's the highest form of prayer. The one that prays and the one who is prayed to are not two. It's in that kind of relationship you have enough love, strength, and awakening in order to make change. And changing is not just about changing things outside of us. First of all, you have to adopt a right view, a dualistic way of thinking. Right view includes the notion of being and non-being, and mind and spirit, which is crucial for transformation and healing. And only when you have the right kind of view, that right insight, there can be deep communication and communion and mutual understanding. The wrong view is that the earth and you are two separate beings, a dualistic way of seeing. To breathe in deeply, be aware of your body, to look deeply into your body, and to realize you are the earth, and your consciousness is also the earth. Thank you.
Thank you, Seth.
Good morning. So a couple of years ago, if you had asked me in the summer what I was reading, I would have talked your ear off about this book, which changed my life, is what I kept saying that summer. This is The Soul of an Octopus, a surprising exploration into the wonder of consciousness by Cy Montgomery. If you haven't read it, I highly recommend it. She's a very joyful, curious person. It had a profound impact on my sense of nature connectedness that Clara was talking about earlier. So I'm just going to read you a brief snippet. The cast of characters in this little story from these couple of pages are Octavia, who is an octopus. There are Bill and Wilson, who are employees of the Boston Aquarium. There's Steve Curwood, mentioned briefly, the host from the radio show Living on Earth. and then the capelin, the small fish that are fed to Octavia. I was completely unprepared for what happened when Bill opened the top of her tank that afternoon. As host, Steve Kerwood, his producer, and his sound crew stood by. Wilson fished a capelin out of the small plastic bucket of fish he had positioned at the lip of Octavia's tank. Flushed with excitement, Octavia flowed immediately over to him, not just extending an arm or two, but rushing toward him with her whole body. Her head bobbed to the surface so she could look into our faces. She looked us both directly in the eyes and then accepted the capelin. As she conveyed it toward her mouth, 3 of her arms rose from the water and she grabbed Wilson's free hand with some of her largest suckers. I plunged my hands and arms in and she grabbed me too. 1 arm, 2, then a 3rd attached to me. I could feel the suction of the suckers, but her arms did not pull me. Steve, meet Octavia. Bill invited Steve to let her touch him too. Roll up your sleeves, take off your watch, he instructed. We always joke that they're very sticky-fingered, so they could probably slip off a ring or a watch without you realizing it, but also we don't want anything sharp on ourselves that would hurt them. Steve obliged and extended his fingers. Octavia uncurled an arm to taste him. Oh, cried Steve, she's grabbing a hold here. Wilson handed Octavia another capelin. Yup, feel the suckers, said Steve. Bill explained that she could control each sucker individually. Wow, said Steve. So she'd be amazing playing the piano. Can you imagine? We were drowning in sensation, the feel of Octavia's suckers on her skin, the spectacle of her subtly changing color, the procession of the capelin as they were passed forward to her mouth, the unconstrained acrobatics of her many unjointed arms. 6 of us were watching her, and 3 of us had arms in the tank, before anyone noticed what had happened. She had managed to steal the bucket of fish right out from under us. She was holding the bucket fast with some of her strongest, biggest suckers, while using hundreds of other suckers to explore Wilson, Steve, and me. Octavia wasn't interested in the fish. They were still in the bucket. She was holding it in such a way that the fish in the bucket's bowl faced away from her. She drew the webbing between her arms around the bucket, almost like a hawk hides its captured prey with its wings. As she had been with the tongs she grabbed from Scott the week before, Octavia was more interested in the object that held the food than in even the food itself. Apparently, the 6 of us were not sufficiently interesting to occupy her vast capacity for attention. And unlike the guest who texts and checks his email while eating and carrying on a conversation at a dinner party, Octavia did not seem distracted as she multitasked. She was able to focus on each of her many simultaneous efforts. This stunned us all the more, because we had clearly been overcome by our single, and one would think simple task, watching what the animal, who we were actually touching, was doing. So if an octopus is this smart, Steve asked Bill, what other animals are out there that could be this smart, that we don't think of as being sentient and having personality and memories and all these things? It's a very good question, Bill answered. Who knows what else is actually out there in the ocean?
Laura?
Hi. So last summer, Clara and I went to Nova Scotia in our camper van, and really the main reason was to see the tides. This is called cycles. Visiting the famous Bay of Fundy. My favorite things, the laundry on a hot, sunny day. Nothing else we have to do but wait for the next cycle. We count, stack loonies to slip into slots, to turn our clothes while napping, free of bird or queen dreams in our comfy camper van. harbored in the almost empty parking lot. After folding shirts and pants, we walk across a mile of red mud, under pink sky, among scurrying crabs, shells and salty puddles, covered just this morning by deep tidal water. Soon to be drowned again, as waves tick off the ages, minute by week by season, as we sleep and wake, and add our little ripples to the sea.
Lurching all of us. Good morning, everyone. I just want to say before I start that what Jenny was asking for at the beginning, that some of you would step forward to share the reflection. I'm all for that. I'm just aware every time we hear from each other, there's such a richness that comes forth, and so don't be hesitant. You can be nervous, but don't be hesitant. This book, Leaves of Grass by Walt Whitman, was his great, passionate, sweeping celebration of being alive. He started in 1855 and continued editing it until just before his death in 1892. And part of it was the part you may be familiar with, There Was a Child Went Forth Every Day. And in 1943, HarperCollins, or one of the publishers, made a picture book of that. And since I was alive then, a few years later, that book was presented to me, and it was my favorite book when I was a child. It's an invitation to do what everyone so far has already talked about and the hymns have talked about, is to stop thinking and to start observing and realizing that we are already one. I was telling Ann Dean, her license plate is outside, and it says oneness. She's been trying to tell us for years that there is no separation. So the Buddhists say, end your problems and by stopping thinking, and just become what we already are. There was a child went forth every day, and the first object he looked upon, that object he became. And that object became a part of him for a day, or a certain part of a day, or for many years of stretching cycles of years. The early lilacs became a part of this child, and grass, and white and red morning glories, and white and red clover, and the song of the phoebe bird, and the third-month lambs, and the sow's pink faint litter, and the mare's foal, and the cow's calf, and the noisy brood of the barnyard. Or by the mire of the pond side, the fish suspending themselves so curiously below there, and the beautiful, curious liquid, and the water plants with their graceful flat heads all became part of him. The field sprouts of 4th month and 5th month became part of him, winter grain sprouts, and those of the light yellow corn and the esculent roots of the garden, and the apple trees covered with blossoms and the fruit afterward, and woodberries and the commonest weeds by the road, and the old drunkard staggering home from the outhouse of the tavern whence he had lately risen, and the schoolmistress that passed on her way to the school, and the friendly boys that passed, and the quarrelsome boys, and the tidy and fresh-cheeked girls, and the barefoot Negro boy and girl, and all the changes of the city and country, wherever he went, all these became a part of that child who went forth every day, and who now goes and will always go forth every day.
I just saw an ant cross, and I was reminded of 50 years or so ago, my mother and I went to the Waldorf Astoria for a presentation of an award, the Fargen Award, Eleanor Fargen, to Anne Carroll Moore. And while we were sitting there behind a huge red velvet curtain, a little mouse crept out and crept back. And Mother and I both saw it. I don't think anybody else did. We didn't say anything. It was okay. So was the end. Here's a page from Farley Mowatt's Never Cry Wolf, which is a fictionalized memoir that describes his time as a naturalist commissioned by the Canadian government to observe the wolves of the far north, up near Hudson Bay, country of the Inuit, though when it was published in 1963, Mowat called his friend Utek an Eskimo. Quote, "It was when we came to a discussion of the role played by caribou in the life of the wolf that Utek really opened my eyes. The wolf and the caribou were so closely linked, he told me, that they were almost a single entity. He explained what he meant by telling me a story which sounded like something out of the Old Testament, but which was actually part of the religious folklore of the inland Eskimos. Here is Utek's tale. In the beginning, there was a woman and a man, and nothing else walked or swam or flew in the world, until one day the woman dug a great hole in the ground and began fishing in it. One by one, she pulled out all the animals, and the last one she pulled out of the hole was the caribou. Then Kayla, who was the god of the sky, told the woman the caribou was the greatest gift of all, for the caribou would be the sustenance of man. The woman set the caribou free and ordered it to go out over the land and multiply, and the caribou did. And in time, the land was filled with caribou, so the sons of the woman hunted well, and they were fed and clothed, and had good skin tents to live in, all from the caribou. The sons of the woman hunted only the big fat caribou, for they had no wish to kill the weak and the sick, since these were no good to eat, nor were their skins. Yikes. Nor were their skins much good. And after a time it happened that the sick and the weak came to outnumber the fat and the strong. And when the sons saw this, they were dismayed, and they complained to the woman. Then the woman spoke to Kayla and said, "Your work is no good, for the caribou grow weak and sick, and if we eat them, we must grow weak and sick also." Kayla heard, and he said, "My work is good. I shall tell Amarak, the spirit of the wolf, and he shall tell his children, and they will eat the sick and the weak caribou, so that the land will be left for the fat and the good ones." And this is what happened. And this is why the caribou and the wolf are one. For the caribou feeds the wolf, but it is the wolf that keeps the caribou strong. End of the story. And Mowat goes on, "I was stunned by this story, for I was not prepared to have an unlettered and untutored Eskimo give me a lecture, even in parable form, illustrating the theory of the survival of the fittest through the agency of natural selection." And I think there's a reflection in that another day, but this is not when.
The amazing variety we've had in these 6 readings. So I'm going to read words by a woman named, an Abenaki woman by the name of Robin Wall Kimmerer. She's a professor of biology at SUNY in New York, and she's also an author of a book called Braiding Sweetgrass. We are surrounded by intelligences other than our own, but we've forgotten. There are many forces arrayed to help us forget, even the language we speak. As a beginning student of my native Ashkenazi language, I'm paying a lot of attention to grammar, which is how we chart relationships, including our relationship with the earth. In English, we never refer to a person as it. Such a grammatical error would be a profound act of disrespect. It robs a person of selfhood and kinship and reduces a person to a thing. And yet in English, we speak of our beloved grandmother Earth in exactly that way, as it. The language allows no form of respect for the more than human beings with whom we share the earth. Objectification of the natural world reinforces the notion that our species is somehow more deserving of the gifts of the world. Using it absolves us of moral responsibility and opens the door to exploitation. In Ashkenazi, it's impossible. We use the same words to address all living beings as we do our family, because they are our family. Let me make a proposal for the transformation of the English language, a shift in worldview through the humble work of the pronoun. We don't need a worldview of earth beings as objects anymore. That thinking has led us to the precipice of climate chaos and mass extinction. We need a new language that reflects the life-affirming world we want. Spiritual teacher Stuart King reminds us that the language is a sacred gift to the people. He suggested that the proper Ashkenazi word for the beings of the living earth would be Bemediziaki. I recognize that this beautiful word would not easily take the place of it. Inspired by the grammar of animacy and with full recognition of its Ashkenazi roots, might we hear the new pronoun at the end of Bemediziaki, nestled in the part of the word that means land. Ki, to signify a being of the living earth, not he or she, but ki. When we speak of the sugar maple, we say, Ki is giving us sap this spring. We need to make a plural pronoun too, kin. Now we can refer to the birds and trees not as things, but as our earthly relatives. We can look up at the geese and say, look, kin are flying south for the winter. Language can be a tool for cultural transformation. Words have power to shape our thoughts and our actions. On behalf of the living world, let us learn the grammar of animacy. We can keep it to speak of bulldozers and paper clips, but every time we say ki, let our words reflect our respect and kinship for the more than human world. Let us speak of the beings of the earth as the kin that they are.
Thank you, Mary.